Well, here we are again. This time we are not talking about a Phish show. We are talking about Tom Marshall's podcast with Trey as a guest. Undermine is the podcast. This was season 4, episode 29. It's a bit old right now. It was actually released over 2 years ago. I'm a little late to this party. I don't know how I missed this one. One of my complaints about Tom's podcast is like, well, I know you can't have every episode a member of Phish on, but occasionally, right? I remember listening to the episode with Mike and Tom, and somehow I just totally missed all of this one. So I highly recommend listening to it. A lot of you have probably already heard it. And it was supposed to be about fall of 97, and more specifically, the Denver show in fall of 97, November 17th. Well, that was just impossible for Trey to stick to just that. Like, for example, the first time they try to get into it, he's like, well, you really have to go back to 92 and 93. And then he talks for a while, and he talks for a while. And then they try to drag him back into 97. They're like, so, this show in 97. He's like, well, actually, in 94, as he starts talking about getting married and having kids. And so really is what he was trying to say was, I had to listen to it twice. And you gotta be able to speak a little Trey. We've heard enough of him over the years. They don't do a lot of this type of stuff. But over the years, we've got, I don't know how many hours I've logged of listening to Trey talk, whether if it's on CBS Sunday Morning or Mark Maron a while back, or just interviews throughout the years. There's a Trey speak there, you need to do a little bit of translation, and you gotta look at what he said and then be like, all right, here, what's he really trying to say? So what he was really trying to say was, he couldn't just simply be like, oh, well, this is why fall of 97 was fall of 97. I think they were maybe they weren't hoping for an answer, a specific answer, but it seemed to be like, look, fall of 97 is just incredible. And it kind of seemed to come out of, it's not like anything else, how, why? These were the type of questions they were hoping to get answered, I feel. Well, Trey wanted to talk about everything starting in 1992. He went on in very good years, but mostly like, hey, those were the years we were practicing a lot. We had these listening exercises. He talked about It's Ice specifically, how he would spend like 6 hours on just one part of It's Ice. So they were these maniacs when it came to band practice and just getting everything perfect. And then, like I said, the listening exercises would go on for hours and hours and hours. So this is when they were just basically becoming black belts as a band and individual musicians, and as well as together. And it was always a little bit of a together thing, And so he talked a little bit about that and how complex the songs were back then. He mentioned Rift, It's Ice, Maze. He also kept throwing Divided Sky into that boat, although that one was written much earlier. I did notice that. He kept wanting to shove Divided Sky onto the Rift era albums. And then he talked a little bit, speaking of the Rift album, how somebody at the record company hated it and told him that they were uncool. And around that time, that's when I sense in them shows in 93 and 94, there's just like a hunger and a desire to just be undeniable. Like they were just trying to prove to everybody and just be undeniable. And part of it is you got some wacko at Elektra telling them that they're uncool and nobody's ever going to like that. And, they gave Trey a couple of CDs to listen to, and he said he left there basically giving everybody the middle finger. And he had a huge chip on his shoulder and it pissed him off. So then that led into it as well. And then he talked about how he was the first one to get married and have kids, and it was almost like this double life. Not that he didn't like his life at home, but that perhaps maybe, he didn't say it, but he was almost like, it was just like total freedom out there on the road. So maybe I overdid it, which then that led into the talk of the ongoing party, just nonstop partying. And before shows, after shows, in between cities, on the bus, just blasting music. A big important part of this was blasting Band of Gypsies, Jack Johnson, and James Brown, just on repeat at full volume over and over and over again. And then that was the soundtrack of the ongoing party. And that they also were just like stuffing in tons of work at this time, like Ghost and Farmhouse and all the touring in Europe and appearances on TV and just all this work, which was maybe not necessarily what was cutting into practice time, but it was still a very big creative time. He didn't mention the Talking Heads album, but I bet he would, That was another thing that factored in there. They're learning the Talking Heads around this time, leading up to fall of '97. Friend of mine, Joe, always feels like that was a very pivotal moment, a moment where it kind of turned things. They learned, they leveled up, so maybe you could say. And then they got a stripe on their black belt at that point. And then also Trey spending time, purposefully spending time with Russ and Tony, two of his longtime musician friends from Vermont. Headed into the Farmhouse album, wanting to add like a little bit of a funk sound to it. And so basically, after talking all about that, all of those things I just mentioned, Trey mentioned, and then he talked about how he listened to this Denver show of '97. So he said, when I put this show on, I heard all of that. So that was Trey's experience with fall of '97. It wasn't like, hey, we just decided, let's just be like a jam band that's funky. There was no conscious decision. It was just all of that. First they had to learn to be great musicians to have the ability to do what they did on stage then. And then all the music just being pumped into their ears that they were listening to while everybody was partying. And then just the hunger and desire and being told that they sucked, and then proving everybody wrong. And then by this point they're like, boom, they must have felt like, ha ha ha. They were on their laughing at everybody tour, basically. I don't know, so I highly recommend listening to it, and you probably have to listen to it twice. You'll have to read between the lines a lot. But basically, from what I got out of it was there is no simple answer of why fall '97 was fall '97. You have to really include everything. Said he was very, and I'm also a big fan of '93. I think a lot of people are big fans of '93. Trey, a huge fan of 1993. So as we end here, I had this queued up here. Check this out. Thought this was, now mind you, they're trying to talk about Denver '97 with the guy.
I was so proud of us in '93. We'd walk off stage and I'd be like, we're playing music that no one else in the world, I've never heard a band play like this before.
That was '93, though, Trey. Come on, we're trying to talk about Denver '97. I think he briefly mentioned the Ghost. Talked a little bit about Mike. You just got to check it out. I'll include a link down in the description. There's one right here on YouTube. I imagine you can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. The Undermine podcast. Undermine, not mind. Season 4, episode 29. Trey Anastasio, guest. Guitar player. The band Phish. Hosted by Tom Marshall with his friend RJ as a co-host. I guess. Maybe this episode only. I don't know if RJ's always there or not. I should listen more. It was pretty good. We don't get a lot of this from the guys, so. And like I said, I know there was a good one with Mike as well. I don't know about Paige and John. I think John only talks to like obscure young drummers on their podcast.